Welcome everyone. Welcome to our 14th meetup of Romania Power BI and Modern Excel User Group. Thank you all for joining the third meetup of this year. Today we have the pleasure to have the second Romanian speaker as a special guest. So thank you, Radu, for your availability to present. I'm really happy that you could join Romania Power BI User Group, and I'm pretty sure even if this is the first appearance, it will not be the last one.
Let's hope.
For our newest members, my name is Christian, and I will be your host today. We should get going. We'll have some for the session. I'd like to have some small introductory and organizational stuff. We are in the welcome and overview part now. We'll go through the next meetups and then the feature presentation by Radu. Some live Q&A at the end, even if we'll decide together with Radu how we should do it. We have some special slot at the end. And then after the live Q&A, we have the Romania Power BI User Group Enterprise DNA raffle, and then the wrap-up. I'll tell you more about the raffle. In order to have a good session and not have any problems, please make sure that your microphones are muted during the session. Type your questions or comments in the chat area. If you have some specific questions, please prefix them with a Q so we can spot them easier for Radu. I will do the moderation during the session. If you have some internet connections, please drop off and join again. Teams is recording everything. And speaking of recording, this is the note that I told you about, Radu. I have a special note here that the meeting is recorded, but the note is for me in order not to forget to start recording. So our next meetups in April, we will have Alex Powers, one of the Power BI CAT team, Customer Advisory Team members, with a session on Power Query M. He said that this is the M year, so I'm looking forward to see. Probably it will be something on Power Query Online. Then in May we have Ed Hansberry, which is a Microsoft MVP, with a session on data modeling. And then in June we have Pragati Jain, which will have a session on storytelling with data. I'm really looking forward to these three next meetups because it will be something really, really good. I told you at the beginning, we have, since August last year, we have Enterprise DNA as a primary official sponsor, and Enterprise DNA is giving us on every meetup 3 packages of 1 year free membership plus Analyst Hub to distribute it to our members. And in order to participate in a raffle, for those ones, please scan this QR code or write down the URL. It's not a problem if you don't have time now, because I will put the link in the chat in a few minutes. Radu, you are also welcome. If you don't have a membership on Enterprise DNA, you are also welcome to participate, but you'll have the exact same chances like everyone else. So,
okay.
Coming back to our session today, we have Radu Popa. Radu is one of the best tech trainers in Romania, and we've actually met through the Excel community. I think you are still running excelninja.ro, right? This is the site where the site where I first found you some years ago, and then I was watching your webinars and your courses, And this is one of the great benefits of the community, because we get to meet like-minded people, get a network. We've never met in person yet, but maybe we'll have an in-person meetup this year, and we can meet. Hopefully, we'll do something announced in time, and we can do the arrangements, because we are not in the same city. Radu is one of the most well-known trainers in the Excel community in Romania, and he has actually two sites that he's running, excelninja.ro and onlearn.ro. And on onlearn.ro, there are multiple courses on different technologies, Microsoft technologies, mainly VBA, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Power Apps, Power BI, and Flow, right? Power Automate, like
Yes.
it's called lately. Thank you again, Radu, for accepting our invitation, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Christian. I'm just checking to see if you can hear me. Let me know in the chat if the audio and video is okay. Christian was having trouble hearing you like 2 minutes ago, but now it's sorted out, so hopefully it holds good. So let me share my screen. I still have 2 slides to show you. They're a bit weird because I like to use weird slides. So I thought about what would be the best thumbnail for this for this session, and I put the coffee machine because I kind of love coffee, but I also think that there are some similarities between Power Query and making coffee, and it's a lot about how you work with data, how you prepare and cook data to deliver something good that you can work with. And this is how I see Power Query, and I think my evolution is from drinking, that crappy coffee like 3 in 1, 3 in 1 coffee. Then you start drinking more, and then you start getting interested in the mechanism of Power Query. This is what I got the chance to experience during the past 2 or 3 years. I worked a lot in consulting projects, and I found that Power Query is a very cool tool to use to make things go faster. Now, as mentioned at the beginning, I'm starting from the assumptions that some of you are experienced Power Query users, some of you are not. So I'm going to make like a short introduction at the beginning, but as we move on, we will go into more advanced, more specific stuff, okay? Just a few words about me. Christian told you that I'm a trainer. I'm not sure I'm one of the best or whatever. I'm just like a trainer in Excel.
Don't be modest.
I've been working in training since 2013. So far, I managed to torment more than 3,000 people with my Excel and Power BI and whatever courses. And also I spent almost 3,000 hours delivering courses. This number below is the number of online interactions that I usually have in 1 year on my sites. Christian told you about excelninja.ro. Fun fact, I'm now working hard to close this site down. So I'm at work closing this site down because I want to integrate this into onlearn.ro. I started blogging.
I was asking you.
Yeah, I started blogging about Excel, and I wasn't very able to think into perspective that I'm limiting myself to Excel only. I got a lot of interest. I got interested in Power BI, in Power Apps, in Power Automate, and posting about these topics on excelninja.ro doesn't make a lot of sense. This is a list of companies I've been working with. They don't probably say very much to you. They're Romanian companies from Oradea. But what I'm doing now is my work is divided into 3 directions. First of all, I'm delivering trainings, online and offline. Second of all, I'm working a lot in consulting. What I like to say is that I'm able to learn new things while my customers are paying me. So this is one specific objective of mine while I'm doing consulting. And I also produce online content for my website. This is a picture of my family. it is funny that I'm wearing the same shirt like in this picture, but Teodora, Vlad, and Sarah. This is why I probably won't be able to hang around very much at the end. Teodora will start calling me and say, okay, Radu, where you are, come home. You have to put the kids to bed. Now, this was the introduction. As I was saying, I will be making a short introduction to Power Query, but then we'll go into more specific things. Now, let's go to Power BI. And what I would like to mention now is that most of you probably know this, but Power Query is the mechanism through which we can get data from different sources into Power BI, but also into Excel. Some of you maybe have worked with Power Query in Excel. Some of you maybe were working in Power BI. So it will work in both, but at the beginning we'll focus on Power BI desktop. Now, as I was saying, we'll make a short introduction. I have here a few files on my desktop. First of all, we'll try to get the data from this Excel file into Power BI just to see what Power Query can do and what are the main transformations that we can have. Another short thing, I really encourage you to ask questions as we go. So you don't have to wait until we go to the Q&A session. You can ask questions wherever you go, because I usually stop from 5 to 10 minutes to discuss questions. Okay, so I encourage you to use the chat, write questions, and we'll stop and go through them as we move on. Now, as I was saying, I want to open up this, I want to import this Excel file that has some sales data. It's like a random table. I mean, it is a sales table, but it could be whatever else. Now, I'm going to get it into Power BI using the get data option, Excel work, because this is an Excel workbook. Now it's on the desktop, easy to get here, Superstore sales. So far, it's pretty easy. I mean, to get something into Power BI, if you've been working with this app, is not very complicated. But where things get interesting is when we choose not to just load the data, but to transform it. Because our discussion today would be about what happens when we choose to transform the data and change the way it looks and change the way things are presented using Power Query. You can see now that we are in Power Query editor over here. So we are now actually working in Power Query. Lots of options here. If you're not familiar with this tool, most of the things that we have here are kind of new, but we'll discover some of them as we move on. Now, the question that I would like to answer first is like, why on earth would you use Power Query? Why do we need this? And the answer, I think, is pretty simple. It is because we want to, it is because the data as we have it is not okay for analysis. Usually at the end of a Power Query transformation, whatever, we end up with a table that is good for analysis. But let's say this table is not right. You can see that we have here some dates that are good, dates that are not good. We have blank rows, and maybe we have columns that we don't need. So what we want to do now is to modify the information so it's better to what we need. Now, first of all, I'm going to remove something that we don't need. For example, I'm going to remove the row ID. It's a useless information. Just click remove and that's it. Like removing columns is pretty easy. Removing rows is as well easy. But what I like here, and it's a feature that I would really like to have in Excel. Maybe, Chris, you can pui o vorbă bună la Microsoft. Is this feature to remove blank rows. This is very useful because when you have blank rows, you usually want to get rid of them. So removing stuff that you don't need is pretty easy. That's one category of transformations. Another category could be about sorting data. I mean, I don't usually do this a lot, sorting data, because usually my table is going to a pivot and I do the analysis over there. But let's say that maybe there are tables, especially when you're using Power Query and putting data into Excel, that you want to have the information already sorted. So yeah, you can sort by ascending, descending. This is pretty similar with Excel. I'm going to sort this table by profit from largest to smallest, just for the sake of it. And I'm sorting the table, that's it. Removing sorting and also filtering. If we want, we can say, okay, we don't want a specific category, we don't want accessories to be in our report, so we filter it out. This is pretty easy and it's pretty intuitive. Even if you don't know anything about Power Query, if you click around here, you'll find these things out. Another category of transformations would be to change the information on a specific column. For example, I can say that I want, let's try to split something. I'm going to try to split the customer ID. I'm going to split it into two columns, the TC, like the first two letters, and then the following. I'm going to use something similar to text to columns in Excel. Probably you know it, if you know a little bit of Excel, you heard about that option. We're going to use split column here, and I'm going to use it by delimiter and use the dash like a delimiter. I really like the fact that I can choose here leftmost, rightmost, or each occurrence. Now, that's very cool because sometimes you want to split, maybe have a name that has 2 or 3 words, and that little option can help you a lot to work with data. Now, I split a column. I can also rename it like customer ID letter. I have lots of ideas tonight. Okay, this is pretty easy to do. And another category of transformation that we have here in Power Query is to add new columns, to have calculations done here directly in Power Query. For example, maybe I want to calculate the profit margin. I have the profit, I have the sales, and most likely the profit margin is like profit divided by sales. So I'm gonna use the add column and just write a custom function. The name of the column will be like profit margin, and I have here like profit divided by sales. This is pretty basic. What I'm doing now is really basic. Just wanted to show you the main categories of the transformations that we have here in Power Query. And of course, we also have here the Power Query formulas. We have a list of functions available for us to use for more complex calculations. I think in the next webinar, if I heard it right, it was about M language, and I think there's a lot about maybe new functions that have come. And I have here the profit margin. If I want, I can make it percentage so it looks better. In other words, Power Query is a mechanism that enables us to work with data and not just import it, but make all the changes we need to bring it into the shape that we needed. And one question that I get a lot is that, okay, Radu, I know to do everything what you showed me in Excel, but faster. And it's a very good point. I mean, it could be easier to do everything here in Excel without the need for Power Query. The problem is that when I do it in Excel, I have to do it every time. And what I like about Power Query is the fact that it helps us to make these changes automatic. So if this file is like a monthly or weekly export of something from SAP, it's very cool that I can change the data through Power Query and don't have to do it again. Just maybe change the source and that's it. At the end, I'm going to click close and load, close and apply. Sorry, close and load it is in Excel, and it will bring the data into Power BI as a table. And what I'd like to say here is that I think I told it at the beginning, we can use it either in Power BI, either in Excel. If you use Excel, you will actually be able to see the result much better because it shows up as a table or something very similar. So I just want to stop here for a moment and to see if there are any questions or observations about what we did so far about this part of getting started with Power Query. I think I saw something in the chat. It was interesting.
No, nothing yet. Not a question. I was just saying that I was writing in the chat that sorting it's an expensive operation, especially on large data sets. And Kirill is saying the same thing.
Very, very good point. I don't actually use sorting a lot because I don't really care about how the table is sorted. As Kirill was saying, also try to present the data and sort it in the visual, but not in the table. So it's a very good point.
Well, sometimes you need it if you do group bys or indexes, things like this. But if one can avoid it, we can avoid it.
Great. Now, this was like a short introduction into Power Query. Now, I want to continue with a little bit of more introductory content related to specific problems that we encounter when we import data. And I'm going to import another data set. We're going to remain here in Power BI. It's another Excel. Kirill, if you have another question, you can put it. We can stop a little bit to answer it. Christian,
Okay.
can you unmute Kirill?
Hey, Radu. So just a quick question. When you gather your requirements, right, and kind of trying to understand what the solution might look like, do you, how often, like, when do you kind of make a decision between, oh, I'm going to do this with Power Query, or this is best to like move all the transformations to, you know, SQL or whatever the up as far upstream as possible? Like, where's that breaking point, right? Okay, Power Query can handle this. You only have like a couple of Excel spreadsheets or whatever, right? No problem. Versus, oh, you actually need more of an enterprise solution for this. Can you share some thoughts on that?
I have to admit something, that I'm not that familiar with extremely big data sets. So usually what my customers give me, they give me either reports that come from SAP, that are exported from SAP, or they give me some files that are working on a process like that. So I'm not that experienced to say, okay, I've been in enterprise project and so on. What I have encountered like recently was what happens when you try to do too much in Power Query, when you have like 25 million rows of data. You know, I have a customer that is a retailer, and I'm helping them build a report, and they have to be really careful on the moment they hit refresh, because it takes like an hour or something. And that's what I was trying to tell them. Okay, guys, try to make the calculations and everything else not in Power Query. Let's do them in Power BI, because if you have to stay like 1 hour after each formula change, then you're like in trouble, no? But let's say that I'm not that experienced with extremely high big data sets and so on.
Okay, thank you.
But I see like a mention here that makes a lot of sense. To do as far upstream as possible and far downstream as necessary. Maybe Michael can elaborate on that a little bit later on. Just want to make a point here to mention something else, because this is still like getting started with Power Query. I want to show you a file that is pretty messed up. You know, let's get. I think I have this file, and this is like an Excel file that I built. It's a very basic file. It has only like four or five columns, and I'm gonna transform the data. Now, not sure if you realize this, but when I look at a table in an application built by Microsoft, I already know that something is wrong when I see dates to the left. And it's the same when I'm seeing numbers to the left, okay? So when I'm seeing this like date 2, you know, is to the left, I know that this is not a valid date and it's actually a text information. I can see it also through this calendar. This one has ABC, this one has a calendar, so this is a good date, this is not a good date. And Moving on, I also have a number here, and honestly, these look fine, you know, but the numbers here are actually, I'm gonna remove this step here, are actually different, you know. So it's 711.110, but here I have a comma, here I have a dot. So my point is the following: when you import information through Power Query, you also have to keep in mind to make sure that the numbers are numbers and they're not denaturated, not messed up, and the dates are good dates, you know. So if I'm looking at this, I already saw that I had some issues with this column, and I think it was like this column. Now, I'm going to do something very basic just to change the formatting through here. This is basically like format cells in Excel. So if you know a little bit about Excel, you know that you can format a cell like a date. This works fine. All days go to the right. It's a good sign. I'm doing the exact same thing here. And what I'm seeing here that is that some dates go to the right and other dates have an error. The ones of you that are experienced with Power BI know that the problem is the way this was written. So I'm going to change the step again. And I'm looking here. And this is the Romanian way of writing dates, like day, month, year with a dot. The problem is that my file, my setup, is set up in English US. You know, so my regional settings for my computer and Power BI are set up for English United States. So that's not very good. So when I try to do this, like, okay, make it a date, it actually reverses the day and the month, which is not very good, you know. And where it cannot, for example, here, it cannot reverse, like there's no month 19, you know, it gives me an error. Now, I have to be careful when I'm working with this. And this is a very bad example because honestly, I think in a normal data set, you probably don't have two different formats. I mean, either you have Romanian format or English format or French format or whatever. Usually you have it the same all over the place. But now here we have different. Now, one option would be for me to go into the options and settings and wait for it to load, go into regional settings and maybe change this. But if I'm having like two different formats in the same page, not very useful. So what I'm doing now is that I'm going to use the using locale option. This is very useful. I found it out on my own skin, you know, the using locale option. I had issues like this. And what this enables me is to make it a date, make this column as a date, and also tell Power BI or Power Query that this is date formatted in Romanian standard. So I'm going to use the date, not date time, and here I'm going to write Romania. Now this is good. You can see the formatting here, and now it works. So this is a good option. Here, if I have month, day, year, I have nothing to worry about because this is like in line with what I have as original settings. It's the same with numbers. This column works well. I can make it like a decimal number, no problems. But here I have to use using locale just to still loading, make it a decimal number, and also use Romanian here as an option. I would emphasize this. I think it's important to make sure that what we are getting into Power BI or into Excel is correct. You know, we don't want to mess things up as we're importing it into Power Query. I'm going to use close and apply, and we have the second table here in our data set. Let's see if there are any other questions or maybe mentions related to good or bad information or correct or incorrect information in Power Query.
No, nothing yet.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
So far, so good. Okay, thank you. Now, I'd like to move on. And another subject that is interesting when using Power Query is about centralizing data. For example, I'm going to use this file and I'm going to put it into a folder just to make give an example. So like this file, I have it more than once, you know, I have like 3 copies of it. copy paste is not working for me tonight. Okay, so the scenario is the following. I have maybe a monthly report. I want to put it in a folder, and I want to gather all the data and make it into a single table. Some of you probably know this and how we can do this, but that's the idea, you know, to centralize information from different tables. But as I mentioned here, these are tables that have the same structure. They don't have to have like the same exact number of rows and so on, but it's important to have the same structure, you know, the same table header. I'm going to do this, and I want to mention something here because I have a little bit of frustration when I'm using that automatic combine feature, you know. So most of the people that I'm working with in courses usually like to use the combine feature. I don't really do that, you know. I'm gonna show you why. So I'm gonna use the import from folder. So this is pretty simple so far. I'm gonna get the folder. It's like from the desktop. Trying to find it. Yeah, it's here. New folder. Okay. As a tip, if you're importing from a folder, don't have an Excel file open from that folder because it creates like temporary files and stuff like that, you know. So there's like a measure here. So importing from a folder, and the easiest thing for me to do is to use combine and maybe transform data to automatically append all the tables and put them into a single table. Why I don't like to do this is that usually this automatically creates helper queries. You probably saw them, but I'm going to show them here. It is like an example, like a parameter. I'm going to use the orders table and just click OK. Still loading, yeah, but fun fact, I'm using a Mac that is running Windows as well as Mac OS, so that's why my speed is not like the best. Now, I have here, but this is what I don't like. You know, I don't like the fact that it created the helper query and stuff like that. And there's another issue that I see here when using that automatic combine option. And I'm going to use close and apply to demonstrate it to you. So let me close this. Now, so it works, but now I'm going to make a simple change into one of the files. I'm going to change the name of the sheet, like orders 6, you know, something like that. Just change the name of a sheet. If I'm doing this and I use that automatically combine option, let's try to refresh this folder query because I'm expecting it to crash. Yeah. So we see here an error because it's very, very specific to that structure and that context. Yeah. So I'm going to show you like maybe a workaround, what I'm doing to import data to centralize data from different folders. And I was saying that I don't like to use that automatically import. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm having a hard time to delete from model. Couldn't find the button. And here's how I like to work, because you know, when you have like 2 queries, there's no problem. But when you're working with maybe 10 data sources, you know, you don't want to have like 7 helper queries, you know. So that's why I like to work as clean as possible and to have as little queries as possible and to have things like organized. Now I'm going to go exactly into the same folder. And now I'm going to use the more manual approach. I was very creative when I gave the name of the folder like new folder. So I'm using transform data, and I want to do the steps myself, you know. So I want to get from this list of files to get down until the table and everything else, you know. So I'm going to use like a step-by-step approach. For example, I'm going to start with removing other columns. I just want the content column. Then I'm going to use like a weird function that transforms the binary content into something that we can actually work with. So I'm going to use the custom column, and here I have a function called excel.workbook, and that one. So I have content binary, custom table. This is what I want to keep, the table option, and then just expand it. It will go like one level lower, and in my case, I want to filter everything that has orders in it. So if it has orders in the title of the sheet, I want to have it in my table. So I'm going to use here like a text filter, something like contains orders. Yeah, so this is what I have, like order 6, doesn't matter, just to have the word orders in it. I just want to keep the data, remove other columns, very cool feature, removing other columns. Now, I'm clicking OK, and now I'll see the preview of the data. And next, what we do is to use first row as headers to move this first row into the table header. So it looks better not to have that table heading 1 and table heading 2, and so on. But here, I have to be careful at one specific thing. What Power Query did was to put all the tables like one on top of each other, So what we have here is that we have the table heading more than once. If you go into, let's say, ship mode, because I think this has like not very, no. I expect to see ship mode in here. Because, as I said, it put like tables one on top of another. So I'm going to use ship mode to uncheck it here, and also to uncheck the null, because I don't want that thing. So this one looks better. And if we are here, let's also delete this helper query, because I don't want to keep this. Transform sample file. What is that? Okay, I have to delete this first. It's really cool to delete stuff in Power Query. Delete group. I hope I'm not deleting stuff I need. Okay, and also delete group. Much better. Now we have here the new folder query, whatever, and this was like a more hands-on approach, a more step by step. It is a little bit more work, but as I said, if you have lots of queries coming from folders, you probably prefer to have them as little helper queries as possible. The result is a normal table that is presented like in a simple way. Now, I would also like to stop for a few questions. Christian, anything interesting in the chat?
Yes, there was a question, and it got me thinking. When you did the change type to locale, is it any difference if the changing type is text? So
usually
does it
not
make any difference when changing the locale for text fields?
I mean, the text is like default, So if you really want to make something text.
This is what I said also. I replied to Shivanand in the chat, but he gave me a really interesting question, and maybe you have the answer, because I don't know how this handles special characters from different languages.
Usually the text should keep the format as is, So it shouldn't interpret or try to change anything on that column, So I think it shouldn't impact, what we put there. That's my perspective here.
Yeah, as far as I know, changing with locale is changing data types and not formatting, because in Power Query, data types and formatting is different than in Excel.
Yes.
So probably text data type will remain text data type.
Yeah, I don't have, so my single weirdest example of weird data types is that when I got the chance to import a file from Amazon, they give you like a separate file for each market you're selling in, and the one from Sweden had a larger minus. That was very bizarre. So that gave me a lot of errors. I couldn't understand why, when I'm formatting as a number, it doesn't work. Like but I still try to change it from text to something else, So that's when the problem came. I didn't try to change it from text to text because I never had, this kind of scenario.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Now, let's move on. We still have some more things to do. Now let's talk about a very specific example. And honestly, this example is much more suited to when you're using Excel to import as a destination for your Power Query. So I'm gonna minimize this for the moment, and I'm gonna just open a blank Excel. I'm talking about doing something like VLOOKUP in Power Query. So not only getting tables, but getting a table that is like merge. And let me show you a specific example. So I have here in my files, I think I have two CSV files, okay? Two CSV files, one of them contains a list of sales information, something like that. But what we have here is that we don't have the product that is being sold. We just have an ID of the product. And we have another file that contains the products. We have the product key or the product ID and other information about our product. So what we want to do is to import both of these into an Excel file using Power Query, but as a complete table. So not as two separate tables that we need to do VLOOKUP between them, but as a complete table. Okay. Hope it makes sense, and I assume that many of you know what the VLOOKUP function Excel does. It's like pretty basic. So coming back to my Excel file, I'm going to use
lately.
Yeah, now it's like XLOOKUP, but all habits die hard.
Exactly.
Even though I have been using, I was able to use like XLOOKUP from like 2 or 3 years. I'm still using VLOOKUP as like habits. So I'm going to get data now from into Excel. I'm going to use the CSV file because those two are like two CSV files. And let's go into the desktop, webinar files, start with the sales and import. I'm not going to do a lot of transformation on this file, just not to make sure that things are okay. And they look okay for me. I mean, the numbers look good. They're to the right, so things are okay. Order date looks good. I think this is a file that is like formatted on English US standards. I'm going to use now the load to, because I don't want to put here 3 tables. I don't want like the sales table, the product table, and then the sales and the products table. I just want the final table. So that's why I'm using only create connection. And if I want to do more analysis in Excel, maybe I can use the add this data to the data model option, but I don't care about that so far. So unclick that and click OK. So far I have access to the first table like CSV sales. I'm going to go and very quickly import the second one, the products table. Click import, and the same, I'm going to use load to just to put it into Power Query and have access to it. So why I'm doing this is to have access to the data from the 2 tables and to be able to merge the 2. So I'm going to use the edit here. And VLOOKUP in Power Query is like a little bit of fake news, because it's not actually VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP. It's actually merge queries. So if you need to do something like that sounds like VLOOKUP, you actually use the merge queries option. If I want, I can do the merge here, over these CSV sales files, or I can use the merge queries as new. I'm going to use the second one just for fun, So here, when you select the tables, it's important to know which table to select first. So I'm going to use the sales table as the first table because I want to have information added to this table. So I don't want the other way around. I don't want the sales to be added to the products, but actually the product information I want it to be added to the sales table. Here I'm going to select the products, and the next step, I cannot click OK yet, is to map out what's the link between the two. And we said that the product key is here and it's also here, and it will also estimate some matches, privacy rules, and it shows me how many matches I have between the two tables. I'm going to click OK. Next, I will see that here to the right, I have here an entire table, and I can choose which columns I want to have in my table. So I'm going to use, maybe I will have the product name, maybe I'll have the product size and the product cost and price. I don't need all of the columns. I just need these 4. And the cool thing is that we don't have to do it like 4 times. If you need 4 columns like XLOOKUP or VLOOKUP, you do it once, and you have all the data here. Now, the final step is to close and load. I'm going to use close and load 2, just to show you the different ways of putting data into Excel. I'm going to put it as a table into an existing worksheet here in A1. And if you look at it, basically this is how VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP in Power Query looks like. It's actually a merge between the two tables based on an ID or a column that links the two tables. I'm going to stop here for a moment and let's see if you have any questions so far about maybe this aspect of using merge in Power Query.
Nothing in the chat for now. But the merge itself, it's a really helpful operation. And up until last year, it was breaking query folding. If you had the SQL Server or other data sources where query folding was there, meanwhile, it's not breaking the query folding anymore.
Okay.
And
I see here in the chat, yeah.
There are some additional types of joins and not only left. This is what Andrea Avram is saying. There are multiple type of joins. So left outer, right outer, inner joins, full outer joins. So when you choose to do the merge, you can choose on which type of merge you want to do.
Mm-hmm. I have to admit my experience so far has been with very simple merges, so I think I just went with inner join or something like that. I'm not sure what was the default.
The left outer default.
I see here a question that's very interesting. Is merge better or creating? So should we merge the tables or just import them separately and creating relationships? And honestly, Christian, I would like to see your perspective on that.
Well, this calls for the consultant answer. It depends. So, depending on what you want to do, exactly.
We have to
depending on what you need to do, it really depends. If you have a fact table and a dimension table, so data table and lookup table, it makes no sense to do merge and bring everything in the fact table. Just use the Power BI relationships. If you need some intermediate transformations where you really need data from different tables, so you have to do it. So it depends.
Very good question. I have to write that down. Like good answer. It depends on.
No, this is the consultant answer always.
Yeah, of course. That's also my perspective. As I'm not a super experienced BI developer, but I'm trying to stay away from merges if I can. So I'm doing merges when it has to be done. Sometimes my customer wants a table that has everything in it. So maybe later on it will make a pivot or something else. So I really have to do it.
Yeah, and Kirill is saying one thing which is always true. So it doesn't depend here. Merging, it's really helpful when you want to get rid of Snowflake and build a star schema. So for dimension tables, if you want to get everything in a single dimension table, like you have products, products, categories, subcategories, it's always better to bring subcategories and categories into the product table and stay close to a star schema there. And then do relationships out of between the fact table and the dimension table.
I think there are very, very good opinions. I see that you have more experience than me on that subject, so I'm gonna defer to you. Now I want to move on, and I still have two things that I want to show you about Power Query. By the way, everything that I'm showing here, they're like learned the hard way, you know. So I had the chance to work on projects where I spent a lot of time discovering how to do everything here. I mean, it doesn't take like that much time to discover this, but you know, you learn it the hard way. Now, moving on, I want to talk about the part of pivoting and unpivoting columns, and I want to show a table first. So I'm gonna show like a budget example. This is how usually most budgets look like, you know. So if you worked with budgets, they usually have like some things here, and they have information like every month on different columns. And if you're doing analysis, you probably know that this sucks a lot, you know. We kind of hate this layout because it's hard for us to work with it and put it into reports, you know, because it will give you a specific column for each month, which is not very cool. So what we want to do here is to change the table to make it from a table that is wide to a table that is long, you know, to have something like account number, month, and value, to have like 3 columns, and that's it, you know. So I'm gonna go back to, let's say I'm gonna go back to Power BI. It's kind of the same, it doesn't matter, what we're using Power Query is like the same thing. I'm gonna get data from an Excel workbook, and I want to show you the part of unpivoting a table. So let's take the budget here. I'm clicking open. I'm not sure if that is a table. And let's see here. I think I created a table, so it's good. Now I'm going to use the transform data because I don't like it in this way. I'll use the transform data and yeah, waiting for it to load. So I don't like the way it looks like here, but what I want to do extra is to remove this bottom row, you know. This is the total, I don't need the total, so I'm going to remove rows. I think we have remove bottom rows, like the last one. I know that the last row is a total one and I don't need it. Okay, just want to clean the data up. And if you're doing this, let's also remove the blank rows. Now, looks a little bit better. Now, what we want to use now is to unpivot the table. And I think it's best to show you this because it's much more easy than to explain it. And I think I have like an option here to unpivot other columns. Now it is important here when you're unpivoting is to be aware of what you're selecting, because this is important. So I'm not unpivoting all the columns. I'm unpivoting everything except this one, you know. So I want this one to be like in the same place and everything else to go like back, you know. That's what pivoting means, right? Like we'll go like 90%. So I'm selecting that one and let's use the unpivot other columns. And what I have here is the account number. The attribute is the month. I'm going to change it like month. And the last one is like the value, which is okay. Maybe I say like the budget value is good. Now, so that's what I wanted to show you. If you need to change the layout from a layout that's very like standard for budgets, you know, to move it into a more workable layout, this is how you do it. You use the unpivot. I use the unpivot other columns. You could have selected the ones you want to pivot and, you know, do it that way. You know, so this is one thing that helped me a lot in specific projects when I've been working with budgets. And just also want to make a mention. If you have any questions, just let me know in the chat. I'm going to move on. I want to show you another thing, and then we're going to stop and have more questions from your side, because I'm also looking at the watch and it's already 8 o'clock. So my wife will call me to get home to put the kids to bed. I was hoping that I'm going to get să scap astăzi, dar n-am reușit. So moving on. What I want to show you last is to how to import an Excel file based on the source that you define. So I'm going to click not save here. I prepared an example here, something like import from cell. This is something that I'm using a lot for my customers that want things done in Excel, you know. So lots of my customers have files from SAP. They want to import them into Power Query, do some transformations, and get the data into specific format. And what I found that is interesting is to use this thing like here. Like I have a button here that allows me to select a source. For example, I'm going to select something from my webinar files. Let's say I'm going to select the sales. Okay, this button, as you probably are aware, has a little bit of macro behind it. So if I look at here in developer macro, I think I have this select source, has a few lines of code that enables me to select a specific cell and put the result to select a specific file and put the path of the file into B1. You know, that's what I wanted. And honestly, I'm going to copy paste this and put it in the chat if it's useful for you. Now, I'm not going to explain this because honestly, I think I copied this code from somewhere and I use it in my file. This is not the interesting part. The interesting part is how we can use this and then to import this specific file, you know, to put this specific path into Power Query. Now, to do this, what I'll need to do is to get the data first from a file from Excel workbook. I'm going to do it manually by selecting the file, and then I'm going to update the query to make the file selection dynamic. So I'm going to get the superstore tails and orders. I'm going to transform data. I will just make a single change here to remove those blank rows. I don't like blank rows, as you probably know. Now, if I look into the advanced editor here, I see that the source for this file is very specific. It's like hard-coded. It has to be desktop, webinar files, and so on. But I don't want this. I want to be able to select it to have here like the source from a cell. And what I want to show you here is I'm going to copy a bit of code here. I'm going to close this. I just want to copy this line of code because I don't know it honestly by heart. It's like very specific. I'm going to copy this one and let's go back into Power Query. So this is the actual final result. Now I'm going to edit this and let's change that source. So I'm going to put this into a variable. I think this is a variable. And I will have to also give it a name, that cell, I'm going to give it a name so it gets it. So let's use the path option here. And the source now should not be Mac whatever. It should be like file path. Okay, this is like a random name. You can put whatever name you want here, like file path, doesn't matter, This should be it. The other transformations are like simple, just change type and remove blank rows, and that's it. Click done. And I have an error here because I don't have a named range that is called path in my file. But that's not an option because that's not a problem, because I will create it. I just want to select this one and give it a name like path. Let's do that again and try to refresh this. Now we see that it got something and we want to test it out, and let's make a more specific test. I'm going to get the superstore tails, move it into a different location. And I want to remove some rows from it, so I don't want to have like almost 10,000 rows. I want to have less, like 500 less. Now, as you have the same structure, it's important to keep the same structure. The number of rows can be modified. Go to setup again, select the source from desktop, Superstore sales, we change the source, and also I put here a refresh button that refreshes this this query. And as you can see, it got less rows. That means that he actually got the content from this specific file, you know. And the key here is this little bit of variable, or what's it called, that I'm also going to put here in the chat. Yeah, it's not good. I'm going to put it again because it got it like a cell or something. So what we are doing, first of all, we maybe get a macro to select the source and put it into a cell. Then we define a name, like give it a name, like path, and then use that line of code into Power Query, into Advanced Editor. If you're like really technical, I'm not that technical, maybe you're like writing this by yourself. You know? So I'm using the user experience most of all. I'm not writing it myself, but if I need to change something, I can go here into Advanced Editor and maybe update the file path. Good. Now, I think we're kind of going near that part of the webinar in which we go and talk about some questions. Let's see, Christian, if there are any other questions that came into the chat.
There was one from UV. Can we ensure merging with dynamic columns on tables? It was referring to the previous example on merges. For example, adding a column to table A and expecting it to be visible on merged tables.
Let's look, and I'm hoping that I didn't delete. I think I closed that Excel file without saving, but I'm gonna do it very fast. But I think we should look into the syntax of the advanced editor to be able to answer that, you know. So I cannot answer it like from top of my head. I have to look into the advanced editor because it depends on how.
Provided some very good question, some very good answer that it depends a lot on the use case, and we would need additional comments, and UV just wrote a long explanation in the chat. But I'm looking forward to see your version.
So let's do something very fast here. I'm gonna do like yeah, I'll do a very fast VLOOKUP in Power Query. I still have the language of using VLOOKUP. Now I'm gonna use this file because I still have something. Let's say I want to have multiple columns, orders, and returns. I'm gonna use transform data because now I can have like a very fast. And the idea would be to, okay, this, I'm gonna delete it, I don't need that one. The idea would be to be able to add maybe other columns here in this table, and those columns to show up into this orders table. Now let's merge them. I'm not using merge, I'm just using merge. I think I have an order ID in both tables, so it should be okay. Now, so far so good. Now we're having like expanding, and this is where I anticipate problems, you know. So let's look into the advanced editor. So I have here, you know, merge queries, nested join, and so on. I see here, no, I think this is the issue. So I see here a specific number of columns. What I expect here is to, when I have 3 columns, this will not give me 3 columns because it will give me only the ones that were there at that time, you know?
Because they are hard coded.
Yeah. So this is the problem, not the merge in itself, but the expanded step, you know?
Well, the second part of it, it's optional anyway, because this is the name of the columns that you are expanding. And the first part, it's actually a list of column names, which could be replaced with a table.column names. and getting the name of the table that you are merging to. So it might be an option.
Yeah. I don't have like practical experience with this, with dynamic columns. I would say that maybe there are things that have to be done here in the advanced editor to make this happen. I don't think it works just by using the user interface.
No, for sure not. We would need to modify it a little bit in the advanced editor, and probably table.column names would be your friend UV.
Yeah.
There is another question.
Yeah.
If you want, is there a good way at one click to verify which applied steps of transformations from Power Query support query folding, and if the source of the data is not a flat file?
For me, it's very hard to answer this question. I'm not very experienced into that. So if you have any input on this side, it's welcome.
Wojciech, as you probably know, query folding is not happening on flat files, only on special dedicated data sources like SQL, Oracle, or OData. And yes, you can right-click the step and see if you have view native query enabled. Having it enabled, it means for sure that the query folds and you can see the actual query. Having it disabled, grayed out, it doesn't mean for sure that it's not folding there. I think Nikola Ilic, which was our guest 2 meetups ago, has a really good session on query folding, and it would be a good option to see the entire session on it.
I see a raised hand.
Click. Any other question?
I think I see a raised hand somewhere here.
Yes, let me see who is having the raised hand. Wojciech. Yeah, let me allow.
I think we can allow microphones and unmuting and so on.
Yeah, I will modify. Wojciech, you can unmute now. And I will modify the options for everybody. And the cameras. Anyone can unmute now and ask questions. Wojciech, please.
Thank you for clarification, but is it possible, for instance, instead of clicking every step, to see at the entire applied step if these all steps are query folding?
In Excel and Power BI, no, but in Power Query Online, you have 5 different icons for the steps that are showing on each step whether it's folding or not.
Okay, so the possibility is only, click the every steps and check if it's folding or not.
In Excel and Power BI desktop, you cannot do it. You have to do it manually. You cannot see it. If you are using data flows and Power Query Online, you have the indication already. There are some icons, 5 different icons, I think, which are showing whether the step is folding or not.
Okay.
I will check the link, or I will check the link with the icons.
No. I'm aware that we need to check every step. But for instance, if you have a lot of steps, right? You need to click every steps to make sure if it's query folding or not. So my question, maybe it was wrong, but I would like to find out if it's possible to check if and all steps are query folding instead of clicking everyone.
Well, if you click the last one, you get the information.
But only for the last one or the entire previous
everything,
step?
Everything until there. If the last one is folding, everything until there is folding.
Okay, super. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, let's see if there are any other questions.
No, nothing else for now.
You were talking about query folding. I'm not very familiar with the language. Is it about checking to see if the query actually breaks up or something?
No,
It's
it's
like-
actually Power Query is translating the steps that you did, all the transformations that you did in the native language of the source. So, for example, if your source is a SQL database and you are doing some transformations inside the normal transformations in Power Query, for SQL Server, a lot of the steps are translated automatically in SQL Server, in T-SQL actually. And if you right-click the step and you have query folding, you can actually see the query that Power Query is sending directly, the SQL query that Power Query, even from Excel, is sending to the data source.
Okay. Okay.
Nikola Ilic has some really good sessions on query folding, and I think it would be worthwhile for everybody to go on them. Yeah, we have another question from Zdenek. I think it would be easier for you to read it because my English is not that good.
Imagine you roll data from an Excel workbook with one sheet using Power Query. The file name is everyday name, but the sheet name changes. Okay, and boom. So the idea is that we get data from a workbook, but the sheet name always changes. That's what I'm understanding. So the idea is to get always the first sheet. Okay, that's a very interesting question. So I think it's about seeing what we have as metadata when we're importing stuff here. I'm going to use the new source here just to get a folder and to see what metadata we have when we get stuff from a folder, because that's the idea. Is the idea to but not from the file name, but actually from the sheet name. So I'm going to go one level down. So I'm going to remove other columns, do this thing when I'm using the custom column Excel.workbook. Just want to get to the level of the sheet name. Now, okay. That one remove, and now here. So this is what we want. Somehow to see and you know what I'm thinking? I would be thinking maybe I think this is in order, you know, like the first sheet is this one, second, third, last. If I look at the Excel sheet, I think this is the order that I'm giving it. So I think the idea would be, first of all, maybe to remove.
You can filter kind only to sheets.
Yeah, so the idea is to see only the sheets, and then somehow to, you know, off the top of my head, maybe I would use like a helper column that just gives me the number of the row, maybe put an index or something. And if the index is a multiple of whatever, you know, to filter during that, according to that index, you know?
Yeah, and in the example given, it was a date in the name of the sheet, so the date could be used also for sorting and get the latest one. Yeah,
so it's about sorting and then maybe using a helper column to write a formula that looks and says, okay, this is the first row or the second row or so on, you know? I think it's a lot about position. These, from what I see, look to be in order. Let me see where we can have there was an option, the index, but now I'm missing it.
Add column.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Yeah, this one, like from one. So if it's 1, I want it. If it's 5, I want it. If it's 9, you know. So it's like from 1 to 4.
Put a filter and use this index. Yeah.
Yeah, probably not only a filter. Maybe need a simple formula like an if, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put like a flag column and then you filter by that flag column. So that would be my answer, but it's like an interesting question. Just small parenthesis. I have a customer that had like colors, It was very hard to get the data and do something with it because it didn't have like a column that said this is in kilograms, this is in grams. It was written with a gray, kilograms, and it's red with grams.
In Excel.
Like in Excel. That was very fun.
It's always fun to use colors and then do filtering and sorting by colors. Yes, Not very useful in Power Query.
It is true. Yeah.
Well, thank you. This was the last question. Thank you very much, Radu, for taking the time to come and present to Romania Power BI user group. We'll go quickly on some on the raffle. If there is no one else, I will share my screen and see how many participants do we have. By the way, would you like to participate in the raffle also? Because I know you didn't have time to
I didn't have time to. Yeah, but if I can, sure.
But this is a Power BI report that I was using up until now. I was thinking to modify a little bit the raffle this month and use wheel of names. So for now, as we did it until now, the form gets filled up by everyone. I have a flow which is taking the data and putting it into a SharePoint list. Let me show you the SharePoint list. This is the one which is completed automatically by the flow. And then I built a Power BI report with the SharePoint list as a source. And inside the Power BI report, I have a Power Apps, which is using another flow with a randomizer to randomize the IDs in the raffle. But this month, I was thinking to do something different. And I hope it will work. And this time I will be able to add you manually on this one.
You can add me multiple times if it helps.
No, it's just to make sure that everybody's here. I did it like this because I wanted to see the positions of the participants. It was a pretty international meetup today. And I did something here as I'm connecting to that SharePoint list. See, I have some folders here. I took a separate query. Yeah, by the way, this is a trick that it's working both in Excel and Power BI. Control-Shift+, zoom in. Let's filter out only the ones that want to participate in the raffle. And copy everything. Let me do a refresh just to make sure. Because, yeah, we have everybody now. Copy everything and then paste it here. I don't want to display some sensitive information. It's only the name that everybody proposed.
Maybe you should also add Gabriel. Or he was in.
This is the wheel of names. And I will put you also manually here. And let's run the raffle for the 3 names. Krista from Germany, our first winner.
Great. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Let's run it again. Shiv from Turkey. Congratulations.
Congrats. I was so close.
Yeah, maybe on the last spin. Let me see. I see something which is strange here. 3 empty names, and I don't know where are they coming from, but we'll spin it again afterwards. Run it again and see. Alisa Mate, congratulations. I will send you an email after the meetup, probably tomorrow morning, to confirm your email addresses that you put in the form. Thank you very much for joining and participating in the monthly meetup, Romania Power BI user group. Thank you all for joining, and hopefully you'll come on the next meetup also, where we also have 3 memberships, free memberships. You can spread the word to your friends. And by the way, if you want to see our past meetups, I will post a link in the chat with all the recordings that we had. Thank you, Radu, again for accepting our invitation, and thank you all for joining.